Hello everybody, this is the third part of the video series for selection structures, and what I want to do in this video is just do some examples here just to show you some of the things we've talked about and allow you to see them at work here in some real examples. So what I'd like to start with here is a program that would calculate the cost for a ticket to go to a movie, and I'm not sure exactly what the regulations are these days for admitting kids into movies depending on the ratings and such, but what we're going to do is I'll come up with something here. We're going to ask the user for their age, and then we're going to ask what the movie is rated. And then we're going to ask, what is the showtime of the movie? And with those three things, another thing, we're going to ask if, let's do this. If the user is below 16, I'm assuming that's the age for R-rated movies nowadays, that you have to be accompanied by a parent to see an R movie or you can't get in. I'm not sure if that's still true or not, but we'll assume it is. So if the user is below 16, they must be accompanied by a parent to get a ticket. So let's do that. Then we'll say that ticket prices are, let's see, we'll do $14 if for prime time, which we'll say is after 5 p.m. And we'll do $9 for matinee. That's how you spell that. Matinee times would be before 5. So that gives you it's kind of a synopsis of what all the rules are. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to put the steps down in our program, things we would have to do to accomplish this. So first of all, we need to ask the user for their age. We know we have to do that to start with. Then we have to ask for the rating of the movie. Then we have to ask for the showtime. If, let's see now, I see a typo here. If the movie is R, the user, let's see, the movie is R and the user is below 16, check to see if adult accompanies user. How's that? So based on all of that, we will then calculate the cost. And what I'll do here is I'll say if user is allowed to purchase ticket, comma, calculate the cost. And then we'll display the cost to the user. Something like that to get us started. So first of all then, let's come up to the top and put in our question to ask the user, what is your age? And we'll capture that variable since it's a number. Now then we're going to ask for the movie rating. Oops, I did not do that right. Sorry about that. rating equals text window dot read. This time we're not reading a number, we're reading a string. So we'll just put read here. What is the show time? So we'll put here text window dot read number, and what I'll do here, I'll say enter the hour in military time. Just to keep things simple for right now, we'll have them do that. And then for the movie ratings, the choices we're going to give them are G, PG, or R. And again, we'll keep it simple, and I know there are others, but we'll just keep it at those three. One of the things that you might be thinking about here is, what if the user doesn't do this right? What if we ask them this question and they enter something other than G, PG, or R? Well, we can identify that, we can check for that, but since we haven't talked about loops yet, which is in the next unit ahead of us, technically we don't have a mechanism to go back and ask them again if they screw up. So at this point, if they mess up, all we really can do is say, well, you screwed up, see ya, and exit the program. And we can either take that approach, or we can assume that they're going to enter good data, and if they don't, we can pick a good value for them. If we do that, that's going to be a short-term solution, because ultimately we really want to do is write a loop that again takes them back to the question and asks them again until they get it right. So for now, we'll check to see if they enter something right, and if they don't, then I'll just pick a value for them, knowing that we're going to make a change to that characteristic of the app in our next chapter. Now, actually I say that, but let me make a couple of exceptions to that. Like for instance, the age. I'm going to do a test here, and I'm going to say if their age is less than 1, or their age is greater than 120, I guess, then we're going to put a message up saying sorry, but the age you entered is invalid, and there is no command to exit or close or terminate the app. So what I'm going to do is put an else here, and I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and put an end if. So what's going to happen then is the program's going to run, they're going to enter their age, and it's going to store it, and then it's going to test it. Test to make sure the age is valid. If it's not valid, it's going to tell the user in line 11, else it's going to go on with the program, which means it'll start running the block at line 14 and just keep going down. So what I had to do is I had to put an end if at the very bottom so that it would skip all of that code if they mess up on the age. Now for the program then, I'm going to select this block of text, and I'm going to hit the tab key, which indents the code a tab stop forward. And I do that because this block of code is now inside of an else if statement. So it needs to be indented just as I indented line 11. Now for the movie rating, I'm going to do a check on that as well. If the rating is not equal to G. Now the question I'm going to ask you, do I want to put an and here, or do I want to put an or here? Think about that for a second. What are we trying to accomplish here? In the question I'm asking, if the rating is not G, if it's not PG, if it's not R, then I'm going to tell them that they entered an invalid number. An invalid rating. So if the first condition is true, we may have a problem or we may not. If this first condition is true, and then the second condition is also true, meaning it's not PG or it's not G, then we're going to look at the third. Now, if all three conditions turn out to be false, then we have a problem. That is exactly what the AND statement is for. So if I put in here, so look at this for a minute. Now we have, if the rating is not G, and it's not PG, and it's not R, if all three of those conditions are true, then we're going to go into the block. If any one of those ends up being false, i.e., if they enter a G or a PG or an R, then we're in good shape. Now there are different ways you can write this. Would this be an acceptable way of doing it? If rating equals G, or rating equals PG, or rating equals R? Well, so now it has to be, only one of the conditions has to be true. Now we know that only one of them can be true, but it is also possible that they're all false. And if they're all false, we have a problem. So if you remember back in your logic class, I don't know if you took a class like this or not, you may have remembered a rule that went like this. A and B equals not, and then in parentheses, A or B. Or another way of looking at it, A and B equals not A or not B. The first condition I wrote was using ands. So A and B. Now there's also a C in here, but we don't, that'll fit right in. A and B and C. In the next one below it, I'm using not A. Notice the inverse of if it's not equal to G is that it's equal to G. So if this is A, then this would be considered not A. And this would be not B, and this would be not C. So you can switch from an AND condition to an OR condition by negating the individual variables. So either one of these would work. And then it comes down to, well, which one is more readable? And usually the one that the one that's equal is a little bit more readable. We seem to have a better way of comprehending simple equalities than we do inequalities. And if you look at the two, and this one, the second one might just feel a little bit better in the sense that it just flows a little easier. It makes more sense. The rating must be G or PG or R. It is a better way of expressing it. But either one would work. But I'm going to go ahead and go ahead with that one. Plug that in. So keep that rule in mind when you're doing these logical operators. If it's G, PG, or R, if none of those are true, then we're going to tell the user that now we could do it this way, or, and that's what we did. We did it this way up on line 11. We just basically bail out if they screw up. But I guess what I'll do this time, instead of that, if they put in an invalid rating, I'm just going to set it to the most stringent rating, which is R. And again, this is just a temporary thing. But that said, there are times when you're asking the user to enter a value, and maybe there's a range that you have specified. And there are times when if they enter a number that's below the lower limit, that you can set it to the lower limit. So, for instance, if they could enter anything from 1 to 10, and they enter 12, then you can set it to 10. Or if they enter -4, you can set it to 1. And there are cases where that's appropriate to do. So in our particular case here, we're temporarily going to set the rating for them if they mess it up. And in the next topic that we do, I will show you how to convert this into a loop so that they'll have to get it right before they proceed forward in this program. Now for the show time. If the show time ends up being less than, well, theater, what do you figure? They probably open about 9 or 10 in the morning, so if the show time is less than 10, then we're going to set it equal to 10. Else, if the show time is greater than 12, let's see here. If it's greater than 24, that's not going to work. So if it's greater than 24, actually, if you think about a movie, most movies run at least 2 hours. So if 10 o'clock would be the latest show time, which would be 22. So if it's greater than 22, then let's set it equal to 22. Now again, this really isn't the best way to approach this because you don't want to set the time for them. But rather than just kicking them out of the app, I'm just going to go ahead and set that. That is sometimes a viable approach, is again, as I said earlier, if there's a range and they go outside of the limits, to key it back down to the upper or lower limit for them. And that's basically what I'm doing here. Now here's this check right here. If the rating, so if the rating is R and the user's age is less than 16, and okay, if those two conditions are true, then we have to see if they're accompanied by an adult. Are you accompanied by an adult? Question mark. And then I'll just put, and then we're going to have them type in a yes or a no. So I'll put enter Y or N. Now here's one of those cases where they may enter an uppercase Y or a lowercase y, and also for the N, it may be upper or lowercase. And you really would want to let either one go through. So let's go ahead and set this up so that works, so that they can enter an upper or lowercase letter. Okay, so we're asking the question, are you accompanied by an adult? Enter yes or no. So at this point, we're going to do a read, and we're going to capture this choice. Actually, let's call this adult here, and then now adult is the variable. When I click on it and I look to the right, notice the options I get over there, like convert to lowercase and convert to uppercase and so forth. it turns out that Small Basic has some utility capabilities in it. And one of the utilities that has is a text capability. And what you can do is you can type in text dot, and it will present to you a list of things that you can do with text. And there's a variety of things, but basically you can get the length of what somebody's typed in. You can extract out a part of the text that they've entered. You can check to see if a piece of the text is equal to another piece of text, and you can append text to existing text. You can convert it to upper or lowercase, and so on. And we'll look more fully at some of these functions in a couple of chapters ahead, but for now, the one that we're interested in is this convert to lowercase. So you type in text.convert to lowercase, and then what you do is you pass in to this function the text that you want to convert. And I call this a function. We talked about this in the chapter on modules, and we mentioned that a function is something that returns something back to you. This is a function. You pass things into it. In this case, we're passing into it adult, and it's going to take that string and it's going to convert it into lowercase and give it back to us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take what it gives back to us and set it right back equal to adult. So line 33, we capture what they type in into a variable called adult. Then we take and convert that text into lowercase and put it right back into adult. So we're overwriting what the user initially put in with a lowercase version of it, which in this case is okay to do, because really what we're driving at here is we want to see if adult is equal to y. Now keep in mind, in this case of what we're doing, it'll never be capital Y now because we forced it down to lowercase. So you want to make sure you put a lowercase y here or the test will never succeed. So if they say yes or y here, then I'm going to make another variable called hasAdults. Actually, you know what? Forget that. Let's just keep this the way it is for right now. Because what I'm thinking is if we go down to line 37, it says if the user is allowed to purchase a ticket. The only problem we would have here, I mean, what would prevent a user from purchasing a ticket? You could come up with several things, but we're just going to assume, for the sake of keeping this program short, that the only way they would be prevented from purchasing a ticket would be if the movie is rated R and they're less than 16 and they're not accompanied by an adult. And that condition would be this: rating is equal to R and they're below 16 years of age, and adult equals N. So if any of those things are true, we have to tell them, sorry, but you cannot purchase a ticket for an R-rated movie without being accompanied by an adult. Now, I'll put an else here. Because if all three of those conditions are true, then we're going to execute line 39. Else, in this case else meaning one of those conditions is false, which if is the case, they would be allowed to see the movie, because if the first condition was false, the movie's not rated R, they could see it no matter what. If they're less than 16 is false, then they're certainly old enough to purchase the ticket on their own. And if adult is equal to Y, then if they are young and the movies are, they have an adult with them. So essentially what we can do now here is calculate the cost of the ticket. Now, we have to look, in order to do this, we have to look at the time, the show time, and the rule up at the top says that if the show time is after 5 p.m., that's 17 in military time. So if show time is greater than 17, then ticket price equals 14. Else ticket price equals, and we had $9. Now, what we're doing here is we are doing what's called a nested if statement. You have an if statement here, and you have your then sitting here, and line 39 is the block of code that will run if the condition is true. Then you have an else, and then inside of your else block, we're putting in another if then block. You can do that. You can nest your decision structures, and you can nest them as deep as you need to. However, if you nest more than 3 layers deep, your code usually becomes quite difficult to read. And so I would suggest keeping the level of nesting at 3 or less. If you go and nest beyond that, you may be able to combine some of your if statements together with using some of these logical operators. And that's getting a little bit more intermediate to advanced, so I'm not going to worry about that in this particular video, but it's something to think about, and we can talk about it at a later point. So anyway, if everything's cool, we calculate the ticket price, and the displaying of the cost to the user, we need to move that line of code up and I'm going to put it right here. And I'm doing that because when I'm inside of this block right here, I know when I'm in this block here that I'm going to let the user purchase the ticket. So this block is calculating the price for the ticket, and now I've got that, so now I can display the cost to the user. But I need to do it inside of this block, because if I'm out of that block, I'm in a section where they can't purchase the ticket. So this is the only place this belongs, and so at this point I'm going to put in the ticket cost is $, and then I'm going to say plus ticket price. Now, it's a little bit hard to see this until you can look at the entire program, and it's long enough that I can't display it all in one screen. But just to go back to the top to sort of wrap this up, I ask the user for their age up at the top here, and I get their age. This line 10 is testing their age to make sure it's valid. If it's not valid, I tell the user that it's not. And that would mean line 11 is going to run. Else, if the age is good, I move forward and do all this code below it. Now, if it executed line 11, it will execute that line, and then when it hits line 12, it'll skip that and come all the way down to line 51, at which point it ends the program. So the net effect is if they enter an age that's invalid, it tells them, and then it jumps to the end of the program. If the age is valid, this test fails essentially, so it comes to the else block and goes inside of that. It gets the movie rating, and if it's not G, PG, or R, it sets it to R. It gets the showtime, and if the showtime is out of range, it sets it to one of the endpoints, depending on which is closest to. It checks to see if the movie is R and the user is below 16, that an adult is accompanying the user. And then it's calculating, well, then if the rating is R and they're less than 16 and they don't have an adult, then it bails out. Otherwise, everything's cool and it calculates the showtime. It calculates the ticket price based on the showtime value, and then it displays the cost to the user. This end if block at line 50 corresponds to line 38. So this entire block right here is highlighted at this point. So this example shows you not only how to do an if statement, but it shows you how to nest if statements, and then it also shows you how to use both relational and logical operators. It shows you how to test for equality, inequality in different formats, and then it also has in it this lowercase conversion of a string. So I'm going to save this creature here before the computer crashes on me, which that would not be good. I'll call this selection ex2, and I'll go ahead and run it. Now it found an error on line 26. If I click on that, sure enough, I put a space in my else if, and there is no space allowed in small basic. Now I do this a lot because a lot of the times I'm programming in Java or C# or some other language where the space is required. So depending on what you're used to, you may run into that and you'll have to switch it. So as long as I'm doing that, I'm going to check. I guess that's the only place that occurs. So I fixed that, so I'm going to run it again. So this is good. I'm going to click run here, and we'll try this out. So my age is, I'll put my age in 24. It's supposed to be funny, but usually nobody laughs. The rating of the movie, I'll put PG here. And showtime, we'll put 18, 6 o'clock, right? Ticket cost is $14. I'll run it again. This time, let's do, I'm 14 years old. The movie's rated R. The showtime is at 1,400 hours, and I'm not accompanied by an adult. Oh, see if the N is on a line below the question? I have to fix that. But anyway, it tells me I can't purchase the movie ticket. Now, are you accompanied by an adult? That question right here, that I should have put right instead of right line for that one. Anyway, but as you can see, the program seems to be working. It may not be designed the best way at this point. There may be some ways that you could make this a little bit more readable, but I think I'll leave it this way just because it illustrates the use of decision-making statements in a lot of different ways, and I think it will be helpful in terms of you understanding how these mechanisms work, how these structures work. So this example really should cover you as far as your next assignment. And I think everything we needed to talk about is here. So I think I'll just go ahead and wrap this video up with this one example, and if we need to do more, I'll put more videos together, but I think this will be sufficient. So I'll put this example out along with the first one I did in the last video. I'll put them out in Blackboard along with the links to these videos, and go ahead and watch them, and if you have any questions, of course, just let me know. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.